Now, without further ado, let me welcome Laureen van Breen to the stage from WikiRate. WikiRate's mission is a world where companies can and do respond to social and environmental challenges. But I am going to let her tell you more about that and her work with the Walk Free Foundation.
So thank you so much for having me today, and thank you so much to all the other speakers for sharing your inspiring stories and approaches. I'm still a little overwhelmed by the opportunity to be here and talk a little bit more about our work, so please bear with me if my nerves start to show or if my jet lag starts to show. So what I would like to talk to you about today is the people who work in civil society and are trying to affect the private sector. They will often tell you that there's actually two roads to change: money and legislation. Now, money is something that's notoriously scarce within civil society, and so you'll often find that organizations advise each other by saying, make sure you have a political strategy. Now, what this means is that your work and the output of your work should be immediately and seamlessly applicable to the current developments within the political climate. Of course, there's really, when I started at WikiRate a few years ago, we didn't really have much of a sense of this, and we weren't really on top of that. What we were busy with is developing an open source innovative tool that makes it possible to bring all ESG data together in one place. And the idea would be to create a space where everyone can access this information, understand this information, and actually start to contribute to it. But while I imagine a lot of us here actually have either seen or contributed to a CSR report, how many of our customers and our colleagues, our friends and family members have really read, understood, and given feedback on this information? I mean, we're all affected by companies every single day of our lives, either as a consumer or as an employee or simply living in the vicinity of where these operations are happening. And how is it that we do not manage to then, as a stakeholder, feed into how this company operates? So actually, a lot of the stakeholders are not reached by this information unless it makes it to the mainstream news. And it's actually mind-blowing how much of this so-called public information has never been seen by the public. If you will, we actually would go as far as saying that this public resource has become an exclusive commodity that is either tucked away in really hard to find PDF reports 20 clicks away from a homepage, or actually hidden behind these huge paywalls from like Bloomberg, for instance. And so when you do get to the public data, it's often very messy, it's closed, and it's unengaging. And so we started to develop the WikiRate platform to break down these information barriers. The way this works is that pretty much any type of performance indicator that a company is or should be reporting to can be turned into a metric question on the WikiRate platform. This means that we actually force concreteness, and we make it possible to standardize and start to compare between companies. Now, this can be as simple as, for instance, revenue or number of employees, but it can get into more complex ratios as well of diversity, representation in upper management, or scope 2 emissions by products produced. And we actually are really making sure that with the methodologies, any researcher, experienced or not experienced, can find the answer to this metric question, and every answer is citing a source. And so every single data point can be found or checked and verified by non-expert researchers. So once you start to look at a place that starts to bring all this information together, you can also start to bring other innovations to the table. And one of the things that we've just actually launched is a feature where we can connect companies to their business relations. And so we can start to ask questions that are generally not really covered in CSR reports, like what are the human rights policies of Nestlé's investors? Or how many of Nike's suppliers have a health and safety training for their employees? So we're really starting to bring this network into the analysis as well. So it takes a bit of time to develop a platform like this, and we're still in beta, so we definitely are not there yet. But in 2016, in the spring, we were actually ready for a pilot. And I'll be honest with you, we got lucky. So in the spring of 2016, we were in touch with a phenomenal researcher from the Walk Free Foundation, Catherine Bryant, and she mentioned they would be interested in looking at these modern slavery statements that were coming out, really going beyond compliance and figuring out what companies are really saying in these documents. So we took the Home Office guidance and we developed a set of metric questions that make it possible for non-expert researchers to go and assess these statements. And we did a test with about 20 master-level students from Columbia University, supervised by their professor Joanne Bauer, and they really came up with phenomenal feedback to help non-expert researchers do this kind of research. And so a few months later, we were ready to scale. And we had 7 groups from 5 different universities around the world working on this, and together we've assessed 400, a little bit more than 400 statements. Every single student assessing one statement and peer reviewing another, making sure that we had 2 sets of eyes on every single data point, at least. We then actually really need to first say that there's a special thanks that goes out to these volunteers, because without them, we would have never been able to do it on this scale. And today is actually a very important day for the project, because we've started to actually, today is the first time I'm presenting the findings of this project as well. So before I do, though, I do want to mention that we haven't used a random sample. We've looked at companies from the top 12 economies, because that was of interest to the Walk Free Foundation for the Global Slavery Index, as well as that we looked for comprehensive statements to make sure that students had comparable and substantial assignments. So if you would actually take a random sample, the findings would probably even be more worrying. So the first and probably most finding for the UK government is that out of these comprehensive statements, in total 418 that we looked at, only 26% is legally compliant. Now, legal compliance for the UK Modern Slavery Act isn't that hard. What they failed to do was either provide a homepage link to the statement, mention there was explicit approval of the board, as well as having a signature in this document from a senior member of the organization. And some even failed to do several of these things. Now, you would imagine that if you're a big company, because these were big companies from big economies with really big statements, generally 10 pages, you would imagine they would have had legal counsel to tell them that at least these 3 things should be in there. But yeah, so it doesn't stop there, I have to say. We also found then, if we're looking at policies, that there's 90% that actually have modern slavery policies, which is fantastic and sounds really promising. But then when you take a closer look, you actually see that 24% only have policies that apply beyond Tier 1 operations. And as I imagine most of us know, that's where most of the problems reside. So again, a little worrying. Moving on, we then checked how are companies preparing their staff to handle modern slavery issues. Are they raising awareness? Are they teaching them how to identify and then report modern slavery issues? Not that many. I mean, half are not doing any training at all. The ones that are, it's not included here, but are actually not necessarily training procurement departments. So it's just a voluntary course on their portals. And then, okay, I can keep going on and on about this for about an hour, so I won't, and I'm already over time, so I really, please do come find me, and there's also the publication on the table, and it's online available as well. And then the last thing that I would like to highlight is remediation. So what we found is that, honestly, almost half don't have any type of disclosure about their remediation. Now, this is quite disheartening, and then when you find out that 27% cancel contracts upon identifying it. This is the most common method, but this rarely goes hand in hand with actual worker remediation as well. So in essence, what this means is that we are, when things get really bad, turning around and walking away from the problem. Now, when I started with this project, I was just really excited about testing the tool and the methods, and I didn't really think about what we were going to find. But I can't really stop thinking about what we have found as soon as the results started coming in. And thankfully, I'm not the only one taken aback by this. Catherine, our partner from the Walk Free Foundation, she's also taken aback. And to put it in her own words, she's always thinking about the next publication. So while I'm still recovering and telling you about what we found, she's already working on the next publication where we do a country breakdown and actually are targeting policymakers from the Canadian, UK, and Australian government to help them improve on this modern slavery legislation. So then, maybe just to say, what can we learn from all of this? Now, of course, you can feel a bit disheartened by what we found. I certainly do certain days, but I would like to take a more positive message from it today. So generally, money and legislation are considered strategies for a small group of experts, methods to make this change really happen. But what we find through this case study is that actually non-expert stakeholders are the ones that can help us scale this kind of change. And so I stand here today saying, let's really put that S back into ESG. Thank you.